Happy Devils Wednesday. This is the State of the Fan Address, episode 205. Streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitter Live, and Twitch on the Let's Go Devils Network. Coming to you live from the Primetime Radio Studios in North Jersey and South Jersey, both undisclosed locations. Giving you the best Devils hockey talk as people are filing into our social media pages live. Title of the podcast tonight is Devils Long Way to Top. Should be probably to the top. Forgot the there, Nick, but you were busy before, so I did all the grammatical errors on this one. But that's okay. We've got two special guests today. We have Chris Krenn, who is a Tampa Bay Lightning beat reporter, and you're going to have to help me with the last name here. Austin Nivison. Okay. Did I get that right?
I believe so.
Yeah, I'm just pronouncing it the way it's spelled, but we'll find out soon enough. I was waiting for you.
Was there a question there?
No. I was just waiting for you. I was passing it off to you. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, tonight's going to be an interesting night because both of our guests are from outside Devils hockey. Chris Krenn is the beat reporter for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I worked with him a lot when I was down in Tampa covering the Lightning, so I was like, we had this mini-series of the Lightning. I kind of want to know what his thought is from the opponent perspective. That was a weird series, or whatever you want to call it, where the Devils got dominated on the scoreboard but played well in that first game where they lost 4-1. Then it was a really even game for most of that second game, and they lost in overtime. And then that third game where they just looked like the dominant team and they took the Lightning to the woodshed. So a really interesting series. Did the Devils learn something from those first two games, or maybe was this just inevitable? Was this just, it's like when in the NFL, when you play a team three times, if you lose the first two, the other team usually wins the third. It's like that weird stat. You just kind of learn from that. So I'm curious what he thinks. I respect his opinion. He's a really smart guy. So I want to know, what did you see? What did you see? A Devils team on the rise? Do you see, he wasn't covering that early Lightning team that lost to Columbus. I forget where he was before that, but he started in Tampa during that, I think, the first championship season. And so he doesn't know about the young Lightning. But I am curious to know his thoughts of, what do you see when you see this young team, this young Devils team? They're going through some growing pains right now, Sam. Losing in the last second of overtime last night on a play that, Dougie, you got to do better.
Well,
Dougie Hamilton he's getting caught watching more times than I'd like to see.
Well, and you're talking about a matter of seconds. Take a penalty. Take a penalty. What do you have to lose at that situation? Because, you got to
the issue is if they call a penalty shot.
Well, it's going to go into a shootout anyway. So it doesn't matter to me. They lost the game. I mean, it's you take a risk of a one-on-one in the game, or reset and take the penalty shot.
Yeah.
I'm just looking from a game strategy standpoint. I would have hauled him down, and then nobody touched the puck, and then let the time run out. And I mean, you're talking a matter of a second here,
And here's the thing: is that I think, I'm not as worried about the Devils. Like last night was a fluke. It is what it is. It stinks. A lot of people are worried about Jack Hughes. I'm not. 10 shots. 10 and half of them were pretty decent. It just happens sometimes. Sometimes it just doesn't work out in your favor. And that was kind of what happened at Jack Hughes last night. He didn't get the benefit of the doubt. when it came to where the shots were going, and it happens that way. It's definitely something that.
Well, Nick,
Yeah,
I'm gonna step in here and say this.
Do that because I gotta send this.
Oh, okay. I don't care about the results right now because we're, in mid-March. I know that there's a playoff, getting into the playoffs and getting the higher seed. I only care about the Devils' good habits. Jack Hughes getting a lot of shots on goal. I care about that. I care about Timo Meier doing the little things right, drawing a penalty yesterday without retaliating, which is good, and helping his team. I mean, these games happen, but I can live with it if you're putting 75 attempt shots on net and winding up with 48 of them being counted as shots and making the goaltender work in a seven-game series. I would venture to bet that the Devils would win that series if they did that every single game. You're not going to win every single game, but last night what happened in the end there was kind of a fluke. Just remember, overtime is 3-on-3. Chances of going 3-on-3 in overtime in the playoffs is not really going to happen, especially when the refs will allow players to just play and not call any touchy, marginal calls, and also the fact that with the Devils right now, I think with Lazar out. Bastion out, Miles Wood is out. I think they're, again, that fourth line is decimated, but I think they're still holding their own. I don't know why some fans are just panicking at all. I don't want
because they lost. I mean, they lost 3 in a row, and then they come back and they lose again after a win. So I think
but look at who they're playing. I mean, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Florida Panthers, and the Minnesota Wild. I think last year, the Devils couldn't even hang with these teams.
And you're preaching to the choir. I'm not worried. I was worried after Florida because that was just you can't lose.
I almost wanted to call you that day and check up on you because I was like, what are you talking about?
You can't lose like that. You can't. And the Devils have been giving up leads, and I was checked on that. And I was told that the Devils have given up the least amount of multi-goal leads in the league.
Yeah.
And lost. And that's the key part. Because they gave up a lead to Colorado, they gave up a lead to Arizona, and they ended up winning those games coming back. And that shows tenacity. I think that's good, but you can't be giving up leads. Because in the playoffs, it's going to bite you. And against the Rangers, it's going to bite you. And you don't want to lose to the Rangers.
Yeah, and you know what? It's kind of practice right now. Simulation for the playoffs. One of the things I want to ask Chris Krenn, because you work with him, or not work with him, you know him, is the Lightning with Palat and without Palat, and seeing Palat on the other side through this 3-game mini-series, how big of an impact it is for not only the Lightning but also the Devils with Palat. I think that's one of the big difference makers. Because when they showed the highlights of Palat, I mean, you kind of forgot about Vinny Parisi alluded to this. That you kind of forgot like some of the big plays that Palat was involved with the Lightning. Like in the playoffs, like he's everywhere. His name, his jersey is somewhere on that camera shot because he seems to be involved in all the big moments. The bigger the moment, the more we'll see Palat, and that's what I'm banking on. And I'd like to get his opinion on that. Like, the Lightning are good, but they not as good without Palat. Just having him on the roster. So,
yeah, I'm assuming he's not in the green room yet because I just sent him the link. But yeah, maybe he's and all the links are correct, right? I just want to.
Yeah, they're all correct, Nick. Okay. Look, for those that don't know, listening in right now, because we got a lot of listeners tuning in, Nick and I were pretty much booked all day, and
Yeah.
we put this podcast together, and but we're here. We made it. But so far, I don't see our guest in the green room.
Okay.
Actually, I do see him now. I do see him now. Yeah.
Invite him on.
We'll invite him on. Yeah. So you two know each other. Do you want to do the intro, or do you want me to do the intro?
You do the intro, but we worked together because I lived in Tampa. I was the sports producer, whatever that meant down there, and we worked together on a couple stories as the Lightning made the runs to the Stanley Cup.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, his name is Chris Krenn. He's the Lightning beat reporter, and you can find him on Twitter at Chris_Krenn. Chris, you're on with Sam and Nick. How are you tonight?
I'm great. How are you guys doing? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you loud and clear, Chris. Thanks so much for coming on.
Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you guys again. I'm just going to jump right into it because, you're always on this ride with the Lightning where it's like, 82-game regular season. Here we go. We'll just kind of mosey along, get through these, little ebbs and flows and make the playoffs, and then, we'll go from there. But this past week was kind of a weird one. 3 games against the same team in 1 week is just not normal for any team. But I'm curious, as somebody who's looking at it from an outsider's point of view, what do you think you learned about the Devils in this in this 3-game series you want to call it that our two teams did?
Yeah, I mean, I knew going into it they were a good team, obviously, just based off of where they are in the standings. But I was really impressed. I mean, the thing that stuck out for me the most with them, I think, was their play in the offensive zone. The way they move around, the way their defensemen are so active and up in the play. They gave the Lightning some issues with just how all 5 guys are moving around constantly in the offensive zone. And off the rush, they're obviously really good. They have a lot of speed. And I thought they did a good job finding, kind of that third guy coming into the zone, or even sometimes the 4th guy, the trailer there. The Lightning struggled with that. I think that first game, the Devils were all over them in the first period. They were the much better team. And then the Lightning were able to adjust and kind of slow them down and not let them get going through the neutral zone, and were able to win that game. But I mean, they're a really impressive team. I think adding Meyer is a really, really big add for them. But I mean, you look at their 4 lines on offense, they have depth up and down the lineup. I think adding Palat was obviously really big, coming from someone in Tampa. Obviously, he's a great player, and you got Hamilton on the back end. I'm interested to see how Vanacek can play come playoff time. He's been really good at times this year, and then other times not as great. I know you got Schmid back there too, but I would imagine Vanacek has to kind of be the guy with all the games he's played, and Schmid's kind of inexperienced. But I mean, he's going to be a great goaltender in the NHL too. So they're a fun team, and I think that the series, if they go against the Rangers, which it seems kind of certain that they will, that should be a great series, just with the proximity of the teams, how close they are. And the Rangers are an interesting team, just like the Devils are. I think the Devils could give them a good run for their money, and I don't know. I haven't followed it too closely. Are they going to be able to re-sign Meyer and Bratt? I mean, that was another thing that stuck out, was the Hischier, Bratt, and Meyer line. They were almost every shift they were producing for them. So if they can re-sign Meyer and Bratt, both of them, I mean, that's going to be huge for them.
Yeah, and here, it's not going to be easy. It all depends on what the ask is, because Meyer has that $10 million qualifying offer at the end of the year. Bratt has been prone for the difficult negotiation. So, I think that the point in getting Meyer is that, Tom Fitzgerald, the Devils GM, wanted to extend Bratt after he knew he got Meyer, because he kind of knows, you can kind of play a number in your head and now you know what you're playing with. But they're both restricted free agents, so they can't go anywhere if the Devils don't want them to. So that definitely helps, but it does put them in a difficult situation. I do want to go back to Palat. You mentioned him. I just want to know, what was the emotion like on Sunday with Palat returning, a lifelong Lightning player? He got that. I think it's a $30 million contract with the Devils. but they gave him a wonderful tribute, and they talked to all the players. What was the emotion like in the building on Sunday?
Oh, it was awesome. I mean, they've had, obviously, with the runs they've had and the cap constraints they've had to let a few guys go over the years. And there's been some really good tributes in that building over the past several seasons between, they had Tyler Johnson, who was here for a long time. McDonough was here for a good amount of time, but I mean, he was just such an impactful player that his tribute was a big deal. But I think Palat's was far and away probably the most meaningful and probably the loudest I've heard the crowd for a tribute video. The video was so extremely well done, and man, it's just, you look back at all the big goals that guy scored for the Lightning over the years, particularly in the playoffs, which is great if you're a Devils fan. He still leads the Lightning franchise in game-winning goals in the playoffs. I think he might have,
love that.
Might be like 4 goals or something like that. I think he might be the only one in double digits. So he shows up in really big moments, which Devils fans, like I said, should be really excited about. But it was a really cool video. You forget how long he was here and just how big some of the goals he scored were. Like I said, I mean, there was some back to the series against Detroit when the Lightning were kind of just starting to break into the playoffs, and the triplets line with him, Johnson, and Kucherov. It was a lot of fun memories. He scored in Game 7 against the Rangers a few years ago in the conference finals. I mean, he's just a great player, a really great person. And like you said, the emotion was really high. I think he was always a fan favorite, someone that no one wanted to see go, but it was just, the Lightning fans, I think, have kind of understood over these past few years, or come to the realization that it just has to happen with certain guys once they hit a certain point in the cap world. So sad to see him go, but seems like he's found a role for himself up there when he's been healthy, and I think he'll be a really big asset for them in the playoffs, especially with the experience he has.
And I kind of want to go to that experience because, I said before, you kind of jumped on the bandwagon at a great time. When you started with the Lightning, they started winning Stanley Cup. So just saying, you're a very good omen. But prior to your arrival there, they kind of struggled in the playoffs. They had that very famous sweep at the hands of the Columbus Blue Jackets. They had other playoff failures. But it seemed they learned from that experience, clearly, because they've been to 3 straight Stanley Cup final, and they won 2 of them. The boat parades tell you the whole story of what it meant to win those Stanley Cups. Now, looking at this Devils team, you mentioned Palat, they have Tomas Tatar, you mentioned Vanacek, a couple guys with some experience. Palat has a lot of experience, but a lot of these guys have some experience. What do you think that experience means in the playoffs?
I think it means a lot more than people realize, to be honest. And before I took this job, I probably wouldn't have thought that. But watching them last year, the run that they went on, they talked about it a lot, how much that experience helped them. I think particularly the biggest thing was when they had some big blowout losses last year in the playoffs. They did not start the series versus Toronto very well. I think they had a blowout game against the Rangers too, if I'm not mistaken, in the Eastern Conference Final. And
I believe you're right.
Yeah, the thing with the experience for them that I've noticed is just their ability to turn the page, and that's not only after a big loss, but also after a big win. They don't rest on their laurels when they win, and if they get blown out, it's that was one game. It really doesn't matter if you lose 7-1 or if you lose 3-2. Either way, it's a loss in the series. So playoffs are emotional, man. I mean, even period to period, game to game, there's so much emotion and that goes into it. It's hard not to get caught up in that. And I think that's been the biggest thing with their experience is their ability to, like I said, turn the page and move on. I really didn't realize how important that experience is until last year when they went on that run. And that was my first year as the beat writer here. But I've been a fan my whole life, so I kind of watched them in the playoffs, and the year they made it to the final against Chicago was like just a magical run for them to make it that far. And they had faced some adversity years before that. They'd got swept by Montreal, and then they were able to get past Montreal to get to that point. But it really was. It was the sweep versus Columbus was probably the best thing that could have happened to them in the weirdest way. I mean, I'm interested to see how the Bruins fare this year with how well they've played all season long. because that was the thing for the Lightning is they hadn't played that year any meaningful games for ever. And the Jackets were playing playoff hockey essentially the whole last couple months of the season trying to get in, and they were ready to go, and the Lightning weren't. And I don't think the Lightning responded well to the adversity in that series. And then they use that as fuel. And like I said, it's just their ability to turn the page and move forward, whether it's period to period, game to game, whatever it is. Like I said, even if it's win or loss, they're turning the page and moving on to the next one. So it's huge. I mean, teams have made it far without that experience, but typically, you see these teams winning the cup. They had some tough losses in the playoffs years before for the most part. So we'll see. But like I said, that series with the Rangers should be a fun one, just with the proximity. And I don't know, the Rangers have a lot of talent, but I think the Devils might have maybe a little bit more grit to them a little bit. I'm not sure, but it should be a great series.
And just to kind of go back, and it feels like years ago, but the Rangers had a 2-0 series lead, winning both games in Tampa. The first of which they won 6-2, which is I think the blowout that you were referencing.
Yeah.
I remember as a Devils fan, I remember all the Devils fans were basically had our hearts in our throats the next 4 games, knowing that a Rangers win would really put that series into their advantage. But the Lightning won 4 in a row, and it kind of and we saw that in these games. The Devils had a lot of an analytical advantage against the Lightning over the past couple of games, but the Lightning pulled out to win 2 of the 3 games. And it comes down to tenacity, and it comes down to grit. Do you think those kinds of intangibles can be taught? Like, can you teach a young team, or does it just come with experience and loss and things like that?
I mean, it's tough to say. I think a lot of it can be based on the kind of players you have and the mindset they have whenever they go down. Do you have mentally strong players or guys that are going to hang their heads? It doesn't seem like Jersey has too many of those guys. I mean, all the games were close, it felt like to me. I mean, I thought the Lightning, like I said, I thought that first game they did a good job adjusting, and they didn't really let Jersey get much in that second and third period. But when they went to Jersey, I didn't think they played well at all. And the interesting thing was how good the Devils have been on the road. Or I'm sorry, when the Devils came to Tampa, how good they've been on the road. It's really impressive. I hadn't realized that until they came down. Their road record is incredible, and the Lightning's is not. The Lightning have not been good on the road, but I think that was part of the reason too. Is the Lightning want to improve on the road, and on top of that, like they've played a lot of teams lately that are really pushing for playoff spots and trying to get in. And this is the Lightning, I mean, and they've struggled with that because I think the Lightning have been staring Toronto in the face for so long now, knowing that that's who they're going to play. And it's hard to kind of artificially manufacture that playoff intensity and getting up for those games. And they fell victim to a lot of those teams and got outplayed. Whereas I think coming into these games versus Jersey, it felt like a measuring stick for both teams. I mean, I was very nervous going into the games at Jersey. I thought they're a really good team, and those are some really good games. I mean, I think the Lightning wanted to kind of see where they were at versus a team who's established, and they realized that the season's almost over here. They need to get going and get their game going in the right direction. So to answer your question, I mean, maybe it's something that as you experience some of those comebacks you get, but really, I think it could vary game to game. And like I said, just kind of the players you have. But the Devils, they have a lot of really, really impressive players and a lot of talent too. I mean, they can beat you in a lot of ways. So I think for them, it's going to come down to what their goalie can do and how Shesterkin's going to play too, because he's been lights out lately.
Yeah, he's been really good, which is scary for us.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, I kind of want to go back to the Lightning real quick. Just to put this into perspective, the last time the Lightning didn't represent the Eastern Conference in the Stanley Cup was pre-pandemic. So that might be 20 years ago. That might be 2 years ago. I can't tell the difference right now, but it was a long time ago since the Lightning haven't represented the Eastern Conference. Going into the postseason, despite everything, you said the Lightning have had their struggles this season. Do you still consider the Lightning the team to beat in the Eastern Conference?
It's a tough question. I mean, I think yes and no. Like, I think Boston's record is just so impressive, and I think the whole conference is really good. I mean, you see all these teams adding, and the Lightning, their road to the final last year, they almost didn't beat Toronto. I mean, they had Toronto had Tampa on the ropes. Game 6 went to overtime in Tampa. Uh, and the Lightning got outplayed in that overtime, and then they got the winner from point, and then they go to Toronto and win Game 7, and then the series with the Rangers, like we talked about, that was a really tough one too. So I think just based off of the fact, like you said, they've been the team to go the past 3 years. I guess you could consider them the team to beat. But Boston's been really good. I mean, Carolina's good. The Devils are good. Rangers are good. And all these teams have added. A lot of like I think Meyer's a great ad. But I look at a team like Toronto, and they added, I want to say 5 or 6 guys, and I'm like, man, that's a lot. Like, you almost wonder if that's too much, because like I look at a guy like Tanner Jeannot right now, and he's struggling. I don't think he's found his game yet. And Brandon Hagel, last year they acquired him. He didn't really find his game in the regular season too much, and then when he got to the playoffs, he started playing really well. And now you see the year he's having this year. So I think it's hard to develop that chemistry. With the time between the trade deadline and the playoffs, let alone when you're adding, 5+ guys. I think that's difficult. So we'll see how that pans out for Toronto. But I mean, they have a lot of pressure on them to get out of the first round. But I would say the Lightning, yeah. I mean, I feel like just based off the fact that they've been to the final the past 3 years, they're probably the team to beat. But they really haven't been talked about too much this year, and they lost some really big players, particularly on the back end. Like, the loss of McDonough was big, and to be honest, the loss of Jan Rutta was really big. It kind of didn't get talked about a lot, but he was steady along with Victor Hedman. He was a good guy to pair with Heddy. So they're going to miss him too. I mean, they've had some issues turning the puck over in their own end, and if you do that in the playoffs, it's not going to turn out well. So we'll see. I think that a lot of that is mental, and they've found ways come playoff time to buckle down and get those things figured out. And a lot of these, they hadn't gone on a 5-game losing streak in a long time, but typically in February and March, the past couple of years, they've struggled. So it happens. They're, like I said, they've been staring at Toronto for so long now that I think it's kind of tough to find maybe the motivation that some of these other teams have been playing with. So down to 10 games now. So they're see if they can get their game ramped up, going in the right direction, and then go from there. But I mean, I like their chances. I really do. I think as long as you have the guy they have in net, you have a really good chance, because when the lights are the brightest, he plays his best. I mean, we've seen all the series clinching shutouts he's had. He really, truly is, like, in all the major sports that I've been watching my whole life, like, he feels like one of the more clutch athletes I've ever watched. He's really good in the big game. So, he gives them a chance every night. He hasn't been at his best this year. He's still been pretty good, though. And I think when he gets dialed in, he's really tough to beat. So should be a really fun playoff, particularly in the Eastern Conference.
Chris Krenn, NHL.com, Lightning beat reporter. He already has a couple pieces on the Lightning Devils, just recapping some of those games, kind of a look ahead. So make sure you check him out. Chris, you got anything you want to plug?
I don't have anything I want to plug. I'm just on Twitter, but I will say I love watching Jack Hughes, because this was years ago, but I worked with USA Hockey, and I had the pleasure of going to Sweden for U18 Men's Worlds with him. He was on the team. It was a loaded team. Him, Zegras, Caulfield, Spencer Knight. They ended up winning bronze. They lost to Russia in the semis, but that kid is going to be a really, really, really good player in the NHL for a long time. He's so much fun to watch too. So Devils fans should enjoy him. And his brother, not Quinn. I mean, Quinn is a hell of a player too, but Luke is a great player too. So really bright future for the Devils. I don't have anything to plug other than my Twitter. So thanks for having me on, though. It was a lot of fun, and good luck to all the Devils fans watching.
Yeah, and Chris, if it ends up another Lightning versus a Metro team in the Eastern Conference Final, maybe it's us. We'll have you on again. We'll talk soon. But yeah, follow Chris Krenn. Chris_Krenn, one of the great beat reporters out there. Thanks so much for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. That's Chris Krenn. You can find him on Twitter at Chris_Krenn. You heard it, folks. We're getting respect around the league. It wasn't like that the last few years, Nick. Because when the Devils played the Lightning in the playoffs, the last playoff run that the Devils had was stopped at 5 games back in 2018. The Lightning just ran over them, with the exception of one game. Now the narrative has changed.
I saw something different. Now the scoreboard, it was the first game they definitely ran them over. It was not a fair fight.
Yep.
The second game you saw some fight. The scoreboard was a little different. They just had issues finishing, but Taylor Hall looked really good in that game. They won that third game, and then I believe it was the fourth game where Sammy Vatanen got pretty clearly cheap shotted by certain somebody that we won't be mentioned. But that knocked him out for the series. Losing your number one defenseman, especially when the Devils had such a drop-off that year.
Yeah.
You remember, it was Vatanen, and Vatanen played his best season ever. And then when he was out, a young Damon Severson had to step up. And it just, the Devils just, then they looked like a different team. And remember, Corey Schneider turned back the clock for that one series. Played really well. But the Lightning just dominated possession. And, you see a team like the Devils, and you see a guy like Tom Fitzgerald who's learning from that. You have to dominate possession. You don't have to take the most shots, but you do have to take the most quality shots. And you have to have the puck most of the time. It's like a team in football who wants to keep the defense on the field. If you're keeping a team on its heels the entire time, on the back skates, it's going to tire them out, and it's going to frustrate them. And they're going to grip the stick a little bit too hard, and they're going to make mistakes. And I think the Devils have done a good job of that. Like I said, I don't even think I overreacted on Saturday. I think that was an awful loss. You can't lose a game like that this close to the playoffs, especially when you're on a 2-game losing streak. But they bounced back the next day. So credit where credit is due. The Devils did exactly what they needed to do. And I was no longer worried after they won that game. And in the fashion that they won that game against a really good Lightning team. But you see the game yesterday. I just, sometimes you just don't get the luck, Sam. And I think that's what, I don't want to, attribute it all to luck, because they could have done better at kind of making the right decisions. They had a couple calls not go their way, or not get called when you expected them to. And, the result is the result. They lost to the Wild. Really good team. They stole a point because Timo Meier scored, and he's looked a lot better. The results are coming. He's always looked really good. He fits in this team, but the results are there now. He's starting to score.
Took 6 games.
Yeah. Yeah, he's playing really well. So,
I
got to say, Sam.
It took 6 games.
You're putting positive stuff on Twitter, and people are still mad at you. I don't know. You people just like to yell at you.
No. You want to know something, Nick? I figured it out. I figured it out. If you put something positive, what goes around comes around. There are a lot of people out there. Hey, if they're gonna be mad at me, let them be mad at me. You know what? I'm still like miffed a little bit that, you wrote a great piece about Devils fans should be patient with Timo Meier. Mm-hmm. And I said, I will give it 6 games for an adjustment, which is incredible. 6 games is not a lot amount of games for him to adjust. And since then, I don't even know what his stats are since, game 7, 8, and 9. He's scoring. He's starting to feel really comfortable in the Devils lineup. So Timo Meier, again, if they can re-sign him, it was a great trade. If they can't, and this thing drags on for a year and a half, then it would be a very, very, very expensive rental. But I think they'll sign him, hopefully.
Yeah,
but
I can't.
A $10 million. You do the $10 million. You do the $10 million. Say if it gets that far, you don't want it to get that far because he's got all the leverage in the world at that point. Because
is he arbitration eligible? He is, right?
I don't know.
But I can't imagine he would take it there because then he has to take that contract, not the $10 million qualifying offer, right? It's very complicated. That very rarely happens because the qualifying offer isn't usually this high. This is a relatively new adjustment that players' agents are kind of putting in these contracts to give their guys some leverage.
Yeah.
But, and Chris brought it up. Can they sign Bratt and Meyer?
Well, you know what? Go ahead. Sorry.
I think the contract they gave to Bratt wasn't what you think. Don't think it was very high. And I think that's why Tom Fitzgerald came out and said, I gave him a contract offer. We're waiting. So I think they're at this point where they're, the negotiation goes like this. Hold on. I got to get on camera. You start here, and then the next one's here, and the next one's here. And then this is where there's the impasse. Because the guy really doesn't want to, the team doesn't want to go off here. The player doesn't want to go off here. Everybody says, why don't you just come here and make the agreement? But here could be $3 million each way. Or, $15 million over the life of a contract. Or it could be $2 million. But the team and the player will still fight. Because negotiations hard because there's a lot of ego involved. There's a lot of money involved.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pride involved. And jobs are on the line, Sam. If Tom Fitzgerald signs Jesper Bratt and Timo Meyer to $11 million contracts each, he's got to have to make terrible moves later. And it's going to hurt the team. You look at the Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs have been in a position where they kind of have to hope and pray that somebody like a Mark Giordano will take a league minimum contract, or Wayne Simmons, or Jason Spezza. They're getting really lucky with these veterans who want to go to Toronto for free, basically, and that doesn't work for the Devils. There's not a lot of people who would do that for the Devils.
Well, Toronto's a different story, especially when they want to be that legacy that finally wins it since '67. Before we get our next guest on, the other thing, too, about the Fanatics and that deal, that 10-year deal, again, I put a positive thing out there saying it would be good for the NHL. Do you know why I think it's going to be good for the NHL? Forget about the quality of the jersey. It's going to be a lot of money for 10 years. Everybody wants the salary cap to go up. Where do you think that money comes from? Hockey-related revenue. Look it up. That's why I think it's going to be good, because where else are they going to get a national contract in two different countries doing that, paying big bucks?
And
that's why I tweeted that out. I couldn't believe the response I got. I get the quality of jerseys, but at that price point that Fanatics is selling at, they're not going to go in head-to-head with the current Adidas contract. That's once that Adidas contract expires, in my opinion, give it a couple of years, Fanatics will put their best foot forward. Their jerseys right now, they can't compete with Adidas in the current climate that they're in right now.
Yeah.
But that's just me. But, all right, our next guest, he's an NHL writer for CBS Sports. His name is Austin Nivison. You can find him on Twitter at Austin Nivison. Austin, you're on with Sam and Nick. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We're doing great, Austin. Thanks so much for coming on. I saw a lot of, I've been, seeing, it's funny. Austin's one of those guys where you probably see a lot of his work and you don't realize you're seeing his work because he's just writing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times a day. You're really cranking him out for CBS Sports over there.
Yeah, for sure. It's especially this time of year. It's busy, always busy, and but the main weekly story is the power rankings. And as you guys know, I'm sure I've been high on the Devils for basically the entire season so far.
So let's start right there. Why have you been high on the Devils? Because it's a team that I'm sure. Well, first, do you remember how long it took you to put them in the top 10 of the league for you to
So So before the season started, we did some predictions, and I said the Devils would make the playoffs this year. I thought this was going to be the year they take that step and make the playoffs. But I had no idea that they were going to be at the top of the Eastern Conference for the entire season. It really only took me a couple of years because last year, honestly, the process was good last year for the most part. Their 5-on-5 numbers were terrific. They just could not get any saves at all. And this year, they've gotten the saves. The younger guys have taken a step forward, and you know so it didn't take me long at all because I saw some of the signs last year, and
Mhm.
when everything started to come together this year, it's very easy to shoot them up the rankings.
So, Devils had a rough week. Lost in overtime to the Lightning. Gave up a 3-goal or a 2-goal third period lead to the Florida Panthers. And then yesterday, lose with a second left in overtime. Jack Hughes hits a post, and you've seen it so many times. You hit a post, it goes the other way, especially in overtime, 3-on-3. You don't usually see it go in with 1 second left on the clock, though. So what does that do to a team? You kind of have this national mindset. You kind of see, and you especially want to see those storytelling moments. So you've seen every big overtime goal. You've seen every heartbreaking loss. What do you think that does to the psyche of a team as they try to move forward?
So I think it depends. I think if it's a team in that wild card situation battling for the playoffs, that would be devastating. That would be a gut wrenching loss. But for this Devils team, you're still within striking distance of the top spot in the Metro, and frankly, their underlying process is fine. That game last night, they shelled the Wild in the third period. It's just Philip Gustafson just did what he's been doing for the last month, which is, drag the Wild kicking and screaming to another win. And so I really don't think that it's going to be tough for this Devils team to recover from that. I mean, look ahead this weekend. I think you've got two great opportunities to pick up a combined 4 points against a Sabres team that is completely cratered, and then the Senators. I think the Devils have a really nice bounce back opportunity this weekend. They're still playing good hockey, even if the results aren't always there. It's an 82 game season. That's just going to happen sometimes. It's not necessarily the most satisfying thing in the world to say, oh, they've got some poor puck luck, but I think that's the case. And I think this weekend you could see them bounce back, and suddenly, it's all sunshine and rainbows again.
Hey, I love sunshine and rainbows, especially when it comes to this Devils team. I am curious of what you think. I mean, you like you said, you've been one of the early proponents as far as like national coverage comes for the Devils. But the question I always ask when I have a national writer come on, somebody with a national purview, when you look at the playoffs coming up, you got Boston, we just had Chris Krenn, beat writer for the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're obviously going to be a contender. The Toronto Maple Leafs, as hard as it is for them to get out of the first round, they're still a contender. Carolina is one of the best teams. The Rangers were just in the Eastern Conference final last year. Can you sit here and tell me that you think this New Jersey Devils team is a Stanley Cup contender?
Yeah, I think they are a Stanley Cup contender. I think that now with this Andrei Svechnikov injury for the Hurricanes, I think they could be the favorite to get out of that Metro division in the playoffs. Now, having said that, like you said, not going to be easy. There's a lot of cup contenders in the Eastern Conference this year, and you just listed them all off. But I think one of the benefits the Devils have is, and Dom Lucian of The Athletic wrote about this today, the importance of star power in the playoffs. And in terms of star power caliber players, the Devils are second in the league, tied with the Maple Leafs in that category. So they've got the high-end talent. Hughes, Bratt, Meyer, Hamilton. They've got all those guys necessary to win a Stanley Cup. Now, the issue that I foresee for the Devils in the playoffs potentially might be a lack of, goaltending with a postseason resume. That, I think, is the main issue I could foresee tripping this team up in a loaded Eastern Conference. You kind of have to start nitpicking a little bit. And, if Shesterkin gets hot or, Sorokin or Obviously Vasilevsky, Olmark, can Vanacek elevate his game to that level, I think is the question. But outside of that, everything outside the crease, I really like this Devils roster and how it stacks up to the rest of the conference.
And that's the thing, right? Is that when you kind of compare the rosters side by side, it's hard to say that any team compares to the Devils, especially after that Timo Meier acquisition, right? It's when I'm looking at these rosters side by side, you're looking at an early Lightning team, or you're looking at, one of those best Toronto Maple Leafs teams before they started paying everybody and their mother $11 million a year. Like you're looking at, the early makings of a superstar caliber team.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not even just that high end talent. You have to love the depth on this team too. I think a lot of teams in the NHL would kill to have a depth defensive pairing of, Graves and Marino on the back end. I think guys like Sharon Govich at the bottom of the lineup, those are just good luxuries to have, behind a lot of firepower at the top of the lineup. So I think no matter which team they match up again throughout the playoffs, their lineup is going to compare favorably. And a lot of these players are still ascending, still on the upward trajectory of their prime, which is another, kind of advantage they have over a lot of teams in the conference. So, they just stack up incredibly well.
So I want to talk about stars. You just mentioned Thomas Shizen's article about stars. Obviously, the Devils' biggest star, the superstar, Jack Hughes. A guy who was in the MVP talk for parts of the season. I would say most of the season, but he's been, he got hurt, and now he's been a little bit of a slump. But he did have 10 shots last night. Ridiculous in number, especially for someone who didn't get the score. Looking at both sides of this, do you have any worries about Jack Hughes as we head into the playoffs?
Yeah, I think this offseason, they just need to, get what they can get for him and ship him out of town. I'm not sure. No. No, I mean, he's gonna be fine. So in the month of March, according to the good folks over at Natural Stat Trick, he is 15th in the NHL in expected goals. He only has one. He's tied for second in scoring chances with 53. So, he's doing all the right things. His shooting percentage is at 2%, a very large 2% this month. I don't think Jack Hughes is a 2% shooter. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think he's a 2% shooter. He's shooting over 12% this year. It's only going to be a matter of time. And again, 82 game season, these types of valleys, these types of dips happen. Very rarely do you see, unless you're Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl, can you avoid these dips? Mm-hmm. And frankly, as long as he gets it out of the way now, as opposed to late April or May or whatever the case may be, again, he's doing all the right things. It's going to come. I would not be worried about Jack Hughes in the slightest. Again, he's another big candidate to break out again this weekend and into slump.
So let me ask you this, because you kind of mentioned something that I'm always curious about. Are you a proponent of, because I've seen some people who are, the positive ones saying things like, you want to get these slumps out of the way so, you can get out of these slumps. Are you a big momentum guy? Do you feel like a momentum shift is big going into the playoffs?
That is a good question, because I do feel like there are examples every year of a team that maybe they're a little flat going in and they wound up doing fine, and there's a team that's obviously roaring going in and they kill it. But I think in the case of, unfortunately, hockey is a very cruel and chaotic goddess. It just is, with the shooting percentages and the bounces. 7-game series, anything can happen. But I think, like I said, I don't think this is going to last forever with a guy like Jack Hughes, or as a team overall with the Devils. You mentioned some tough losses recently. I think, as over the course of a season, this is going to happen. And as long as you keep setting yourself up for success, doing the right things night after night after night, eventually the breaks are going to come. You're going to make your own breaks. You're going to make your own luck. So I think as they head into the playoffs, it's less for me about, is Jack Hughes filling the back of the net? Are the Devils just routing teams, by 3 or 4 goals every night? It's more about that process. Are they doing the right things that is going to set them up to get those bounces, get that luck once the playoff starts? And I think they are. So really and truly, I'm not too concerned about the Devils losing any kind of momentum at this point in the season.
So the Devils are going headfirst to what looks like a matchup with the New York Rangers. Now, we just talked to Chris Krenn, and he mentioned that the Rangers, Scully, Igor Shesterkin, looks like he's, he was slumping a couple weeks ago. He's not slumping anymore. Looks as good as he's ever been. What are your thoughts on a series between the Devils and the Rangers? And, finish off with who you got.
So I think wire to wire this season, start to finish, and even in the last 20, 25 games, the Devils have been the better team, particularly at 5-on-5. That much, I think, is clear. You look at the trade deadline acquisitions, the Rangers got some big names in Tarasenko and Kane. And that team has a ton of offensive firepower when they're rolling. We saw it this past weekend. They, threw up 13 goals in 2 games. They can do that to a team, and you don't want to be that team they do it against. But I think while they have the big names, the marquee names, the headline names, I think overall I like where the Devils are a little bit better in terms of their forward group, because a lot of those guys, particularly Kane and even Tarasenko, are on the back end of their prime, the downslope of their prime, or in Kane's case, I guess, the back end of his career. And you have a lot of those guys who are in the ballpark of 30, over 30. This Devils team is still young, early 20s, mid 20s, guys that are still, really entering the best hockey of their careers. So up front, I really like, I think I like the Devils' youth and just their general consistency a little bit better than the Rangers. And then on the back end, Adam Fox, Jacob Trouba, Keandre Miller, that's a tough trio to beat. But Hamilton and Severson are excellent, and I like the Devils' depth a lot better on the blue line. So at 5-on-5, I'm a big fan of New Jersey over the Rangers, but the issue is, as you just pointed out, goaltending. We saw what Shesterkin did last playoffs and all of last season, really. He drug a Rangers team that was not the best at 5-on-5, drug them through nearly to the Stanley Cup final. So if he gets hot and he does it again, like I said earlier with Vanacek, can Vanacek elevate his game to that level? I don't know that we've seen it over a long stretch of time in his career, particularly not in the postseason. He only has 3 postseason starts. But
they didn't go well, though.
No, they did not. And the other issue, I think, is this: they have to keep the series at 5-on-5 because the Rangers' power play is lethal. In between Shesterkin stealing a game or 2 and special teams deciding a game or 2, the Rangers could take a series, but I would probably pick the Devils in what I expect to be a fun, entertaining series for neutral observers and an absolutely miserable series for New Jersey and New York fans.
So before I let you go, before I let you kind of give you some time to plug, outside of the Devils, do you have a team you're really looking at, like be it Colorado, it could be in either conference that you think, you're really keeping an eye on? You think like, maybe not enough people are talking about them, but who are you really looking forward to going to the playoffs? It could be even like a team like the Panthers who's been scorching out. Like who's like kind of your team right now? You're like, I'm keeping an eye on this team.
I really, really like the Kings right now out west. They are playing excellent. They're playing excellent hockey right now. I was pretty low on Gavrikov before the trade deadline. I thought, why would anybody want to give up a first-round pick for a guy who's getting crushed every night? Granted on a bad team, but he was still getting crushed. He's gone to LA and he's been tremendous. Eunice Korpisalo has essentially, for now, solved their goaltending issues, and they are rolling. Their lineup has been tremendous. Much like the Devils last year, the only thing that's been holding them back really has been they can't get a save from either of their goaltenders. That issue seems to be resolved for now, and they suddenly look like a team that could hang with Colorado and Edmonton in the West. And So I would have to go with the Kings there as kind of that team that I'm watching as the playoffs approach, because I mean they took Edmonton to the wire last year in the playoffs, and this team is better than that one. So I think the Kings have a real good shot to win another Stanley Cup this year.
Man, as a Devils fan, we hate the Kings after 2012.
Sure, yeah.
After the call, Rob Scuderi, Steve Renier, the whole thing. I can't jump on the train with you, Austin.
Okay,
but I do want to give you, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I want to give you a sec just to kind of let everybody know what you got coming up. Let them know where you can find you and where you can find your NHL content.
Yeah. So CBS Sports under the NHL tab. Every Tuesday we have our weekly NHL Rewind, recapping some of the biggest storylines and highlights from the previous week. And then every Wednesday I have my power rankings. And over the next few weeks, as the playoffs approach, we're going to have all our playoff preview stuff up there for everybody to read. So it's an exciting time of year. I'm ready for the playoffs to get here.
And we will definitely tweet out the Devils preview, whether it's the Devils Rangers preview or just Devils preview. We'll tweet that out.
Sure. Okay.
So everybody can read it at the Pucks and Pitchforks Twitter account, the Let's Go Devils podcast Twitter account. Get Austin Nivison. Am I saying that right? I just avoided your last name.
A way better attempt than most. Nivison. So just a little bit off. Nivison. Yeah.
Okay. Nivison. Austin Nivison. Check out his stuff. Check out CBS Sports. It probably surprises a lot of people when we get on a CBS sports person writing about the NHL, but they're putting out a lot of NHL content. Austin is a writing machine, so give him some love. Austin, we appreciate you coming on. We'll definitely have you on again soon.
Thanks, guys. Enjoyed being on.
Is Austin Nivison, NHL writer for CBS Sports. I love the power rankings. And if he's in our favor, I like him even more.
Yeah, he's been writing the Devils high. Again, there are a lot of these people I'm kind of like pinpointing. I'm like, what week should I bring them on? What week should I bring them on? Chris Krenn, again, somebody I've been working with for, well over a year now when I was in Tampa. I'm not in Tampa anymore, but I was like, hey, you want to bring up those old times? And he was like, yeah, definitely. So, and then Austin, somebody, I've read his power rankings a couple times. Every so often I run him, I'm looking at just updates. He's doing a lot of updates, and you just kind of, it's one of those things you're like, you don't realize who you're reading. You're like, oh, it's Austin again. It's got just power rankings. So check out his power rankings. CBS Sports is really good power rankings. I really like their formatting. It's very clear. It's it's concise and it's a quick read. You love that. So, Austin, thanks Austin for coming on. I guess it's time for me to do some plugs, huh?
Yeah, we're getting about that time, Nick.
So, Sam, I my plugs are going to be quick because last week I promised you guys an article. I was going to promise the 5 biggest things that would hurt the Devils in the playoffs. But a couple things came up just naturally through like Twitter conversation. And Sam, I am on fire with everything that I have going on right now. So yeah. I had to go with the ebb and the flow. I had to put that on the back burner. I do hope to give that to you by the end of this week.
And Nick dropped out. Well, in the middle of his plug, folks. This is what happens when you go live. And I'm sure Nick's article by the end of the week is going to be wonderful. Go to pucksandpitchforks.com to read Nick's future article. I think his internet actually dropped out. Yeah, you're back. Okay. Well, I was covering for you.
That was dumb.
How great that article is going to be in a couple days.
Yeah, it's going to hit. It's going to hit real hard. But no, right now on Pucks and Pitchforks, I have the 5 players who can play spoiler. That one's doing well. Vinny Parisi just wrote about the last week and just that ridiculous schedule that they played. Jersey Joe had a piece on simplifying the game when they beat the Lightning. Dan Rice wrote a piece about how the Lightning series really is like it sets the tone. Trey Matthews wrote about the expectations for Timo Meier. And then, I wrote that controversial line proposal, Sam. I put Holla and Hughes back together, and everybody yelled at me, and then guess what happened? They put Holla and Hughes back together. So just shows I'm ahead of the curve. I'm just kidding. I stand by that line proposal. I explain why. It's on pucksandpitchforks.com right now. I think that's about it. And then I kind of wrote about 5 Devils players who are going to fight for playoff minutes, so that's up on the site too.
Wow. That's great.
For being so busy, I'm giving you content, guys.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We pulled off a great podcast tonight. Ted says great interview. Max says I just canceled Nick. No, there's no truth to that. Your internet stopped working. I couldn't even see.
Why would he want to cancel me? What did I do?
Yeah, exactly. I got a couple things to plug. You can find me on Twitter at PrimetimeSamWoo for any kind of entertainment in the next probably 8 weeks. March 25th. Game Day Live in Devils After Dark at American Whiskey, 51 Edison Place, across the street from Prudential Center, next to Championship Plaza. You can also see us from the Devil's Den store, next to those Fanatics jerseys and Adidas jerseys. We're going to be partying over there this Saturday, and also March 30th, Devils Rangers, Ranger Hate Day. I think I'm going to be going solo that day. Oh. I don't have any confirmation from, I know Vinny's going to be in Chicago, but I have no confirmation that any of my guys are going to be there. So I may have to put on the body armor myself. I'm going to have to wear this Goal-Aid helmet for protection. And
it might help.
Yeah, it might. I'll wear the crown on top of it, too, just to add the more fuel to the fire against the New York Ranger fans who I believe bought up a lot of those tickets back in November and October, I believe. And that's not going to be good because it's like, But anyway, forget about the Ranger fans. Be there March 30th at American Whiskey. And also April 13th, Stagehouse Tavern, 1099 Route 22 eastbound side in Mountainside, New Jersey, in Union County. Arlette's throwing a viewing party. Game Day Live and Devils After Dark will be there. Plus, music entertainment by Arlette. Yes, that Arlette, the national anthem singer for your New Jersey Devils. So those are my plugs, Nick.
Love it. We got a lot going on.
Yeah. And also, go to pucksandpitchforks.com and Pucks and Pitchforks Twitter account at PitchforkPuck as well. Wonderful Twitter account. I get a lot of my goofy ideas from that Twitter account from the guy that's manning that account. It was a joke. Yeah, it was a joke.
Hi, I'm the problem. It's me.
It's a joke. I still don't understand Twitter, but I'm getting used to it now. And also, I want to shout out as well, if he's listening in, Bruce Cooperman. He wrote a nice note, a nice DM, and he says, no matter what you say in the Facebook group, somebody comes back and curses you out. It's awful. But he also said a lot of nice things about Scotty and the podcast and the positive viewpoints that we have about the team, the New Jersey Devils. Anyway, thank you, Bruce Cooperman, for your nice comments and thoughts. Well, Nick, I'm going to let you go now. I'm going to cancel you out. But go to pucksandpitchforks.com. Till next time, let's go Devils.